Hey guys, welcome to a video on cache programming. I'm going to jump straight into the topic. I'm going to sort of expect you to already know what programming is. As this is more of a concept post, I'm going to be talking about frameworks, but in the specific example, I'm going to be talking about websites. However, cache programming goes all the way through kind of high-level languages through to low-level languages. It isn't specific to web. However, obviously web applications are pretty popular. So I've kind of wrote down a rough script that I want to just talk through so you can kind of get an idea of how caching works and why it's so important. So I want you to imagine you have a website. That could be a little blog, it could be something huge like Stack Overflow, whatever it might be. To render this page and to create this page and everything on it, it all costs server time to render the output, whether that's running the queries to get information, like CMSs, like WordPress, they're taking information for pages and they're doing all these crazy joins and it all gets a little bit crazy, and all of that is putting load on your server. So in an imaginary world where you run a cool little blog that gets 1,000 visitors a day and you post about one new article a day. Now just imagine you didn't have caching. No caching at all. Every time someone comes onto your page, there is something going on, whether it's getting all the data from SQL, your latest post, it could be like select as an example of what a loop might look like on a home page with all the latest posts being displayed, and then say someone goes onto a page itself and it's select where this equals this and that, but the output of what that creates is usually fairly similar. Again, caching sort of a case by case idea, but for websites it's quite generic. So every time someone's reading that page or going on your website, there is something happening over and over and over again. And that just seems a little bit mad if you ask me. So imagine you have 1,000 people in 24 hours. You post one post per day. You are posting 999 more requests to the server to get that same information that needed. Again, this is an imaginary world. And that's just silly. Like, it's absurd. And that's why caching exists. You can run something once, take the kind of finished output of that, and then store it somewhere and reserve it back to people when they make that same request. So instead of running your query, you kind of do this. So obviously no cache and you're running that same query every time. Some witchcraft somewhere. Especially in the case of WordPress, there definitely is some crazy witchcraft. Now with caching, smiley face. Oh, I forgot to add. I can't remember the exact specifics of it, but in regards to websites, there's a fact that someone will leave a page unless it loads in 0.2 seconds, which, I mean, to be fair, I'll just quickly refresh Stack Overflow. It's a very true thing. So with caching, you run that query once. And with caching, you run a query once, you store the output of that query, and by the output of that query, I mean it could be that you actually render the complete entire page, and you store it as like a static HTML file, because also it's not just limited to SQL. It has a lot to do with the computations that are going on the page. I mean, you could have some stuff like, imagine you have a basic web page. We're going to call it index.html, and in that page you might have like a header and a body and a menu, and a footer and some other stuff, and in that body you might have like a section for blogs, a sidebar, and every time you load the page there's some stuff going on here to like render the title tags, maybe like a PHP function. There's some other voodoo witchcraft. Maybe your actual theme is using PHP to compile the CSS and JS from like a PHP functions file. I mean, if you look at any WordPress theme, you'll understand what I mean. And there could be all of these functions that are running, and like that might take 2 seconds, and this might take 3 seconds, and it all adds up to essentially add a lot of time. So I don't want to kind of get into that too much, but just think about everything that you only need to do once, yet you do over and over again. And then, in essence, once you've done it, you can just serve people a finished version of it. There's no need to do things again and again and again. And by doing this, you essentially reduce the speed to load the asset. It reduces the server overheads, which can actually, in some cases, people complain about slow websites. It's not the server, it's the actual fundamentals of how their entire operation is set up. And it's why it's quite common that if you look on any kind of caching plugin for WordPress, is my favorite example, though I despise it, a lot of them will give you the option to refresh the entire cache every time you make a new post, because at the end of the day, unless you change a post, the post will always remain the same, all the content will remain the same, and that really is that. Some things might change, like widgets, but do they need to be updated every time? No. Obviously, in the initial example I gave you, 1,000 people, and each one of them was waiting about 30 seconds for the server to do some malarkey, which, to be honest, is not a half bad estimation of how long things can take, especially on huge websites. I did some quick math, and that's about 500 minutes, which is about 1/3 of a server's resources in any given day. And when you start to think about it like that, that's money right there. So how do you kind of start to get into caching? I think that it's important to obviously understand the concept and start to get into your head how you can optimize stuff from the very ground up, and start to think about like how long you need things for, can I throw them away, and it really just boils down to just being efficient. I, as a profession, build quite large applications for SMBs, and one of the funniest complaints I guess I have is slow reports. Imagine you have a sales report, the results of, say, a quarterly forecast. Boring, I know. So say you have this quarterly forecast and you're going back through them, and we're in 2019, but someone wants one from 2017, quarter 4. I actually, a lot of the time, cache these reports, and there's like a little refresh button, and it's like, this is last updated here. If you want more accurate results, you can click here. And the reports themselves, I feel like, took a couple minutes to run. And they automatically refresh in the background, but the point is they're updated in the background, and then a cached version is served, and priority is given to the kind of more frequently used stuff that's more time critical. But anything that's less time critical, like a table full of people or invoices, there's a cached version, and then it will refresh the cache in the background. So I'm basically giving people a cached version at all times that's updated in the background without them ever having to actually do stuff. And that might seem a little bit crazy, but when you start to add up minutes and times by thousands and thousands and thousands of hits, it just makes sense. And I think it got so bad at one point that with one customer, they had a huge server. I'm talking like £300-400 a month, and it was literally just the cron in the background, and these reports that were absolutely annihilating the SQL database. And you obviously do everything you can, like adding indexes and trimming the fat. And I think that caching, you need to consider it in all aspects of kind of the development process, not just necessarily in regards to websites, because it can be used all over the place. And I think that's all for now, but if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. And obviously, if you are interested in learning about caching on a particular platform, don't hesitate to get in touch. I'm mostly a PHP programmer, which I'm not too happy about, but I mostly work with quite large sort of, as I said, SMB applications. So I know a thing or two about not only the simpler side of development, which in my opinion is stuff like website design, but also completely bespoke applications. So I'm more than happy to kind of help with any problems or see if I can make a video about any questions. But caching is just such a cool topic that I feel like more kind of programmers need to just jump on as soon as they start to pick up the fundamentals of how logic flows with coding, like how I tried to explain. You go onto a website and the posts load and there's all this stuff going on in the background. Once you start to understand that, you can then start to implement ways to speed that up. And caching is one of the many ways to speed up applications, both on the web, but both also, it is used in building applications that are actually installed. It's not just a web specific thing. So thank you very much for watching the video. I hope it was of help. See you all soon.